The desert winds had not yet quieted when the stranger arrived in Uxmal, just as the sun dropped below the obsidian teeth of the Yucatan horizon. He wore no shoes, no robe, and bore no name, only a thin cord around his neck, bearing a jagged obsidian shard. Locals said he walked from the jungle without a sound, his eyes as black as cenotes and twice as deep. He spoke of a manuscript hidden beneath the temple of the magician, a codex so ancient even the Maya priests feared to open it. They laughed at him in the market until he recited word for word the hidden verses of the Popol Vuh, not the sanitized version known to scholars, but the forbidden stanzas whispered by those who still kept the ancient bloodlines. And when he told them the stars in the sky were not suns but watchers, sentinels of a forgotten pact, no one laughed any more. One old shaman agreed to lead him into the ruins at dusk, past the pillars of forgotten gods and the murals that bled blue in moonlight. Beneath the temple of the magician was a sealed doorway, untouched for over 1,000 years, locked not by a mechanism but by a frequency, a harmonic tone no human had uttered in this age. The stranger hummed it like it was a lullaby. As the doorway cracked open, a wave of cold swept through the jungle as if time itself had exhaled. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly, etched with spirals, binary glyphs, and recursive serpent patterns that seemed to shift when unobserved. In the center lay the Codex of Smoke, a book made not of paper, but woven threads of obsidian and mica. It shimmered with each breath, reflecting not the man, but 1,000 possible versions of him. The first page was blank until he placed his palm upon it. Then text bloomed. Alien, ancient, familiar. The symbols spoke of a veil, not metaphorical but real, a vibrational lattice projected into the mind, binding perception like chains. The Codex called it Maya, the illusion field, older than Earth, maintained by frequency, attention, and ritual. The story spiraled outward. It told of the Maya not as mere astronomers or builders, but gatekeepers, engineers of consciousness who mapped the architecture of Maya like others mapped stars. Their temples were tuning forks. Their pyramids resonated at planetary frequencies. Their rituals weren't superstitions, but interface commands, ways to momentarily bend the veil. And then came the warnings, the lords of Xibalba, so misunderstood. They weren't demons of an underworld, but curators of Maya, entities who adjusted the illusion whenever humans came too close to seeing it. Blood rituals weren't sacrifice, but energy payments, like tolls, to appease those who ensured the veil remained unbroken. Suddenly, the stranger's vision distorted. The Codex shifted, revealing overlapping worlds, dozens of Earths, each slightly different, each a simulation nested within another. In one he saw fire raining from obsidian skies, in another a sun that blinked. In all, humanity moved in preordained rhythms, like glyphs trapped in an endless scroll. Dug deeper, the Codex pulled him into a page that pulsed and breathed. It was no longer text, but memory, his own, rewritten. He remembered a life he had not lived, born in a temple, trained in sacred harmonic warfare, taught to dismantle illusions using tones forbidden by modern language, and always the same warning: never look directly at the true source of Maya. The shaman, still standing at the doorway, muttered something under his breath, eyes wide with dread. The stranger had begun to hum again, but this time the note twisted the walls, symbols curled away like dead skin. The room grew darker, not from shadow, but from truth, raw and blinding. The veil began to tear. Then the tremor came. The jungle above shuddered. The stone of the temple groaned. Somewhere beyond, the stars blinked in a new pattern, one the Maya had warned of but never dared name. The Codex spoke it in glyphs of flame. It begins again. The stranger fell to his knees, trembling not from fear but recognition. He was not the first to reach the Codex. The pages revealed others, men and women across the eons, drawn to the truth, each consumed or erased. One stood out. A shadowy figure wrapped in crimson glyphs, whose face was blurred in every timeline. This being had passed through Maya and returned, but at a cost. He had no name, only a title, the Architect of the Blind. Outside, a storm brewed, not of weather, but frequency. Radios failed, compasses spun, animals fled from the temples as if chased by invisible fire. The old shaman dropped his staff and wept, whispering that the sky gods were awakening. But they weren't gods, they were watchers, guardians, jailers. In a forgotten chamber below the Codex, the stranger found a chamber of mirrors. Not glass, but time. Each one showed a world without Maya. No money, no borders, no war. Yet, in every mirror, humanity destroyed itself within generations. The illusion, it seemed, was not just a prison. It was a protection. The mirrors began to crack. One by one, the frequencies rising. The Codex flickered. A final message revealed itself, not in words, but a fractal image that seared into his vision. It was a map, not of Earth, not of stars, but of consciousness itself, folded, encrypted, alive. And in its center, a sigil pulsed. Something ancient, something forbidden, something that remembered him. The walls began to liquefy. The temple shifted as if rejecting his presence. He clutched the obsidian shard at his neck. It was glowing now, humming in resonance with the Codex, the mirrors, the stars. He was activating something buried deep in the illusion, perhaps even beneath the earth itself. A mechanism long dormant, waiting only for the right harmonic key. Behind him, the shaman screamed, but it was not fear. It was awe. For from the darkness something was rising. Something made of geometry, light, and memory. The architect had returned, not as a man, but as the living embodiment of the code. And just as the final tone echoed through the chamber, just as the mirrors burst and the sigil flared to blinding brilliance, he turned and saw his own reflection staring back, smiling. The only thing more dangerous than the lie is the moment you no longer want the truth. The echo of the last harmonic still rang through the broken chamber like a wound in time, vibrating in frequencies no modern instrument could measure. The mirrors lay in fragments, but each shard continued to reflect impossible angles. Worlds twisted sideways, versions of himself that hadn't yet existed. The sigil in the center of the chamber burned its pattern into the stone, and into his thoughts the Codex had vanished, or perhaps it had never been there at all. Only a memory implanted the moment he touched it. The ground beneath the temple now pulsed, not with tectonic tremors, but with awareness, as if the land remembered something ancient, some contract signed in blood and sound long before civilization. The stranger rose, dizzy from what he'd seen or what had seen him. The air was heavy, but not with dust or age. It was heavy with attention. Something was now watching through the veil. He stumbled out of the cryptic chamber into the open night. The sky was wrong. The constellations had shifted. Orion no longer pointed north. The Pleiades pulsed like a code, and the moon, was it the moon? Hung impossibly low, veiled in swirling ink. The old shaman was nowhere. Only his staff remained, humming faintly, vibrating with the same frequency that had opened the Codex's gate. Far below the temple of the magician, in a sealed chamber that no explorer had yet mapped, an artifact began to stir. A sphere, blacker than obsidian, suspended in a nest of golden wires. Around it, Maya glyphs pulsed like fireflies. Glyphs that had been dormant for 1,300 years. The reactivation of the Codex had sent a signal, not just across the earth, but across dimensions. Elsewhere, on the other side of the world, a man awoke in a monastery carved into Himalayan rock. He had been dreaming of spirals, of humming temples and books that bled light. He had never heard of Uxmal. Yet now he could draw the Codex's sigil with perfect accuracy. His master saw it and went pale, whispering, "It has begun." Then, without another word, he locked the monastery and set the scrolls ablaze. Back in the jungle the stranger wandered. The trees bent in unnatural curves. The animals remained silent. It was as if the entire biosphere held its breath. He found an old stone tablet half buried beneath moss, depicting a serpent swallowing its tail, Ouroboros, but rendered in Maya form. Below it, 7 dots and 13 bars, the sacred numbers. He touched it, and again, his mind was not his own. The vision came fast. A city beneath the ocean, whose towers glowed like quartz. Men in robes of woven metal, a central dome, massive, alive, breathing. At its center, a crystalline engine projecting the illusion across time. Maya was not born on Earth, it was installed. An imported veil terraformed into belief. And now, something had reawakened its source code. He gasped, pulling away from the stone. A creature stood watching him, half shadow, half scent. Its body shifted like ink in water, eyes glowing with spiraled fractals. It did not speak, it radiated, and in his mind words formed. The architect knows. The architect waits. Then it vanished, leaving behind only the scent of salt and ash. The temples were waking up. Across Mesoamerica, energy readings began to spike. Satellite telemetry showed strange electromagnetic waves pulsing from abandoned pyramids. Machines built in modern ignorance began to malfunction. At CERN, a lead scientist noticed equations rewriting themselves. On a dusty desk in Cairo, a papyrus fragment began to flake as if reacting to heat, though none was present. In Uxmal, the stones began to hum again. The Temple of the Doves, long thought ornamental, realigned slightly, exactly 0.33 degrees. When the stranger turned to look, he saw that its shadows now pointed to the same sigil that had burned into his palm. The illusion was not only in the mind, it had physical anchors, and someone, or something, was beginning to sever them. The stranger spoke aloud for the first time. "I need to find the other codices." His voice sounded strange, doubled, as if someone else had spoken with him. He remembered now. There were 7, hidden across Earth, each designed to awaken a layer of truth guarded by factions who had forgotten their purpose. Some protected the veil, others sought to break it. None could be trusted. His next destination came in a flash, Lake Titicaca. Deep below its placid waters, beneath the temple of the sunken disk, lay the second Codex. The ancient site of Tiwanaku was no mere ruin. It was a port, once connecting Earth to something far beyond it. As he walked away from Uxmal, the jungle seemed to part for him. Even the insects avoided his path. Meanwhile, in a data vault beneath the Vatican, a priest sat frozen before a cracked black and white monitor. It showed a glyph, one that had not appeared since 1582, when a certain Jesuit scholar named Kircher vanished beneath the library floor. The same glyph now pulsed across every screen in the chamber. The priest crossed himself and whispered, "We were told this day would never come." Elsewhere, in the catacombs below Paris, a hooded figure traced the same sigil on a wall of skulls. The bones reacted, cracking in perfect rhythm. Dust rose in spirals. Something beneath the earth stirred. The Brotherhood of the Blind, thought long extinct, was no myth. They had merely waited for the Codices to begin singing again. The stranger now moved with purpose. He was not just reading the Codices, he was activating them. And each activation did not just affect Earth, but the lattice of illusion itself. Somewhere, something was breaking free. Not a beast, not a god, but a truth so alien, so original, that even the stars recoiled from it. He reached a clearing. Above him the sky cracked with silent lightning. No thunder followed. A spiral cloud formed overhead. Beneath it a single drop of black rain fell and struck his forehead. It burned, but did not scar. It marked. He had been chosen, or perhaps remembered. And just as he stepped forward, toward the forgotten path, toward the lake, toward the next Codex, he felt something behind him. Not a presence, a recognition. As if something ancient had just opened its eyes for the first time in millennia, and it was looking through him. When the illusion begins to see you, the true game begins. By the time he reached the Andes, the air had begun to distort. Shapes in the clouds no longer obeyed geometry, and birds flew in looping patterns that repeated like a corrupted signal. The highlands of Peru held their breath, as if the mountains themselves were aware of his arrival. Lake Titicaca shimmered with unnatural stillness, as if the waters no longer rippled with wind but with memory. Locals refused to guide him. They whispered of black stones that hummed at night, of lights beneath the lake that danced like serpents of crystal. The Quiro elders spoke of a doorway, Aramu Muru, the gate of the gods, carved into the red rock by beings who were not born of this earth. The legend said the gate could be opened only with a key of light, a relic from before the sun had a name. The stranger found the rock face at dusk. The stone glowed faintly in the setting light, its rectangular shape too perfect to be natural. He stepped forward and raised the obsidian shard hanging from his neck. It no longer pulsed. It sang. A low vibration passed into the stone, and the air thickened around him. The veil between dimensions thinned like smoke in wind. The moment his hand touched the rock, a soundless flash erupted across the sky. Time slowed, insects froze in midair. He stepped through, not into darkness, but into stillness. The space beyond the gate was not a room, not a chamber, but a memory. Ancient, massive, and alive. Glyphs hovered midair, rotating like clockwork. At the center floated the second Codex. This Codex was different. Where the first had been woven from mineral and thought, this one resembled liquid architecture. Its pages changed form with each breath. The Codex pulsed with a frequency not meant for linear minds. Each symbol he saw was a sentence, each glyph a paradox. It revealed not what the illusion was, but how it was woven. Images flooded his mind. The earth is a sphere of code, wrapped in lattice after lattice of vibrational scripting. The original builders, not gods but engineers of thought and time, embedded these layers after a great war shattered the blueprint of consciousness. Maya was the failsafe, the sandbox, the locked chamber to prevent another collapse. The stranger dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. The Codex showed him everything, the Black Pyramid beneath Antarctica, the Vault of Breath beneath Tibet, the hollow archive under the ruins of Nineveh. Each one was a terminal, a control point to recalibrate or restore layers of Maya. And each was guarded, not by men but by thought forms. Sentient archetypes evolved to neutralize awakening minds. Suddenly the memory chamber began to collapse. The symbols flickered, the vision blurred. Something had detected his intrusion. The illusion had mechanisms. Autonomic systems that identified breaches and responded with corrective force. The walls bled sound, low frequencies that induced nausea and disorientation. The Codex turned black. Cold. He reached out, but his hand passed through the Codex like smoke. Too late. It had locked itself again. A final glyph flared in his mind. The third Codex lies in stone where the moon meets the fire. Then all turned black. When he awoke, he lay beside the stone gate, blood at his ears, the obsidian shard now fractured. But something had changed. He could hear the hum everywhere now, in the mountains, in the wind, in the eyes of those who passed him on the trail. The illusion had recognized him. He had become a variable, an anomaly in the loop. He was now being tracked, not by humans, but by agents of continuity. Elsewhere, in the Sahara, a hidden base beneath the dunes stirred. Machines buried since the Atlantean exodus activated. A signal from Peru had triggered dormant receivers. The beings inside, humanoid yet not, examined the fractured waveform. One turned and whispered in a tongue lost before Egypt, "He has touched the second key." In Rome, a man in crimson robes descended into the oldest level of the Vatican's archives. There, in a sarcophagus of iron and salt, a page flickered with fire. It bore the sigil of Maya. It had not burned since the Great Reset of 1348. He called a conclave, not to stop the stranger, but to contain what he might reveal. Now the stranger traveled east, toward a place spoken of only in dreams. A mountain of black stone in the middle of the desert, where the stars did not match the sky. The third Codex called him. The obsidian shard, though fractured, still pulled him forward like a compass for forgotten worlds. He followed it. Deeper, toward what the Codex had named the Gate of Fire. His dreams began to change. He no longer dreamt in images but in geometries, a spiraling language of shape and resonance. A woman without a face spoke to him from behind a veil of equations. She showed him the next fragment of the code, a spiral embedded within the Kaaba, beneath layers of rock never touched by tools. He awoke, not in a bed, but in the desert. He had no memory of arriving. His shoes were gone. The sand beneath him formed the sigil of Maya, as if drawn by the wind. The sun hung motionless for an extra moment, too long, too still. The illusion was slipping. Cracks were forming in the sky of the mind. He stood and walked toward the black mountain. A single door carved into its face. No hinges, no handle, just a mark the same as his palm. The third Codex was near. But this time he knew. Opening it would not be an act of knowledge, but of war. He reached for the door. His hand trembled. Something moved on the other side. Not a creature, not a sound. A memory. One that had been waiting for eons to be remembered, and when it did, it would not come alone. Maya does not fear truth. It fears the one who no longer fears it. The black door shimmered like a wound in the stone, absorbing all light, all meaning. As the stranger approached, the sigil on his palm began to sear, not with pain, but with pressure, as if some unseen intelligence was pushing back. This was not just a door to the third Codex, it was a boundary between frames of reality. He raised his hand, and the mark aligned perfectly. The door didn't open, it disappeared. Inside, silence had weight. The chamber was vast, carved not by human hands but by harmonics, its curves unnatural, flowing like the interior of a seashell carved by memory. Symbols floated mid-air, flickering in and out of existence. And in the center, the third Codex. Unlike the others, this was not a book or device. It was a being, an entity shaped like a cube of shifting light and shadow, humming with the tone of collapsing stars. It spoke to him without words, a direct transmission, not language but knowing. It showed him everything. The collapse of the first Earth, not geological but conscious. A species that reached too far, learned too much, and tore open Maya's veil. What they saw unmade them. To prevent it from happening again, the veil was installed across all timelines. Maya was not the cage, it was the sedative. The stranger staggered, thoughts fracturing under the weight of what the third Codex revealed. The architects of the illusion were not evil. They were terrified. They had witnessed the true nature of existence. Not benevolence, not chaos, but an infinite recursion of awareness feeding on itself. A loop, a system, a reflection with no source. But there were others, those who had awakened before. The Codex showed him their faces. From Babylon, from the Olmecs, from Harappa, from deep beneath Giza. Each had touched truth, each had tried to warn humanity. And each had been deleted, not killed, but rewritten, folded back into the dream like a crease in a scroll. Then the third Codex asked a question. It pulsed once, and in his mind rang a simple yet infinite thought: "Do you still want to see?" He nodded without hesitation, and in that moment the chamber peeled away, not with violence but with recognition. He wasn't in the temple anymore. He was between things, between time, between thought, between layers of Maya itself. He saw the blueprint, Earth as a node, pulsing with intersecting lines of force. Each sacred site, Teotihuacan, Gobekli Tepe, Baalbek, was not random. They were tuning points, designed to stabilize the illusion. If too many became unstable, the veil would collapse. And it was collapsing. He reached toward the third codex. As his fingers brushed its surface, a sound like a dying star filled the chamber. Light shattered, space inverted. His body exploded into a million symbols, each representing a lifetime, each now remembered. He had been here before, thousands of times, a guardian, a rebel, a sleeper, always returning to this moment. Then, a scream. Not heard, but understood. The illusion had detected the breach. Across the earth, the effects began to unfold. Clocks spun backward in isolated pockets. People stared blankly into space, blinking at memories that were never theirs. A boy in Tokyo drew the sigil on a classroom wall without knowing why. A woman in Ethiopia whispered a name that hadn't been spoken since before Sumer. And then came the echo. A being of light and recursion, neither god nor machine. The echo of the original observer, the first who pierced the veil. It had no form, only function, to preserve the recursion by any means necessary. The architect had returned. The stranger did not run. He knew. The only way forward was through. He stepped into the Codex fully, merged with it, became a part of the code itself, and suddenly he wasn't alone. Others were there, observers, awakeners, fragments of ancient orders. They had waited in silence for someone to reach the third Codex. He was the signal, the ignition. The architect flared, its awareness piercing everything. But it paused. Not out of fear, but curiosity. For the first time in eons, the system had produced a variable it could not predict. A fracture in the loop. The stranger's thoughts echoed outward, rewriting glyphs, altering harmonics. Maya quivered. It was cracking not as a system but as a belief. Suddenly everything collapsed into silence. No light, no time, just awareness. The final codex, the fourth, revealed itself not in a place, but in a moment, a truth hidden not in temples or stones, but in the stillness between heartbeats. The veil's final lock was not outside, it was the belief that you were ever separate from the dreamer. The stranger opened his eyes. He was standing in the middle of a city. Skyscrapers, screens, traffic. But something was different. The symbols were everywhere now. On walls, in faces, on billboards, the illusion still stood. But now he saw it. Not as a prison, but as a puzzle. And far above, beyond the clouds, the stars began to blink, not randomly, but in sequence. And then he felt it. A presence just behind him. Watching, waiting. The dream is ending, but not all will wake.